I tried fixing her armor, then she asked me to be careful HFY. Ethan Hale stood near the edge of the bay, holding a small repair case in his hands. He was human, and that alone made him an outsider here. The alien crew barely looked at him anymore. They had already decided what he was worth. The warship belonged to the Carvax Dominion, a proud warrior species known across nearby systems. They were taller than humans, broad-shouldered, with armored skin and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Their culture revolved around honor, combat, and their sacred battle armor. That armor was not just protection. It was history, tradition, identity. And now, one of their most respected commanders lay injured inside it. Commander Surith of the Iron Scale had been brought into the bay less than an hour earlier. Her armor was cracked along the chest plate, its energy lines flickering like a dying star. The internal power core was unstable, and every technician present knew what that meant. If the armor failed completely, it would crush its wearer from the inside. Alien engineers surrounded her, their voices sharp and frustrated. They worked quickly, but fear crept into their movements. This damage was not ordinary. The armor had absorbed a direct hit from an unknown weapon during the battle. Something new, something dangerous. Ethan watched quietly from a distance, his eyes focused not on the commander but on the armor itself. He could see the problem. It wasn't obvious. The core was still intact. The outer plates were damaged but repairable. The real issue was deeper, hidden in the way the energy was cycling through the internal frame. The armor was fighting itself, forcing power through channels never meant to handle it. He had seen this kind of thing before. Not in alien armor, but in old human reactors, in rushed military designs where pride ignored physics. Ethan stepped forward once, then stopped. He knew the rules. Humans were support crew, mechanics, helpers. They did not touch Carvax armor, ever. One of the alien engineers snarled something in his language when Ethan came closer. Another stepped between him and the commander, blocking his view with a massive armored body. "Stay back, human," the alien said in broken common speech. "This is not your concern." She lay still, her breathing slow and controlled despite the pain. Through the transparent visor, her sharp eyes scanned the room. She saw fear on the faces of her engineers. She saw hesitation. And then she saw the human. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't arguing. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He was simply watching, like someone listening to a machine speak. "Why is the human here?" she asked, her voice steady but weak. The engineers stiffened. One of them turned toward her, lowering his head slightly. "Commander, he is maintenance support. He should not be." Ethan felt the weight of their attention like pressure on his chest. He swallowed once before speaking. "The power core is looping energy back into the frame," he said carefully. "It's not releasing heat properly. The armor's trying to compensate, but it's overcorrecting." He just pointed. "That channel there," he said, gesturing to a flickering line near the commander's ribs. "It was never meant to handle sustained combat damage. It works fine in training, fine in controlled fights, but after a hit like that, it becomes a trap." This was the moment that mattered. "I can stabilize it," he said, "but it won't be pretty, and I'll have to bypass some traditional systems." "Come closer, human." Nothing ceremonial, just things he trusted. As his hands hovered near the armor, he paused. "This will be dangerous," he said quietly, "for both of us." "I will." Ethan continued, jaw clenched as a surge burned across his gloves. He adjusted again, compensating on instinct, years of human engineering guiding his hands. The flickering lines steadied. The heat dropped. A quiet hum replaced the erratic pulse. Ethan leaned back, breathing hard. "Core's stable," he said, "for now." Sensors confirmed it. The readings were better than before, stronger, balanced. Surith exhaled slowly, the pain easing. She felt the difference immediately. She turned her head toward Ethan. "You risked yourself," she said. It was not a question. Ethan shrugged tiredly. "That's kind of the job." Around them, the warriors of the Carvax Dominion looked at the human with something new in their expressions. Not respect yet, but uncertainty. And that in their world was the beginning of change. The silence in the docking bay did not last long. Once the alarms faded and the reading stabilized, voices returned, low, tense, and filled with confusion. The Carvex engineers moved closer to Commander Surith, scanning her armor again and again as if the numbers might suddenly change their minds. They did not. The armor was stable, more than stable. The energy flow was smoother than it had been before the battle. Ethan remained kneeling beside the commander, his hands still hovering near the open access panel. His gloves were scorched. The smell of burned fabric lingered in the air. He did not feel like a hero. He felt tired, shaky, and very aware of how many armed aliens surrounded him. One of the senior engineers stepped forward, his armored claws clenched. "What you did should not be possible," he said. "Our armor has been perfected over generations." "No design is perfect," he replied calmly. "Not under every condition." "Human," she said, "you stabilized my armor, but you said for now. Explain." "Then repair it fully," an officer demanded. "You have proven you can." That was not a request. "Because in a way it is," he said. "It reacts. It remembers stress. It responds to how it's treated. Machines last longer when you respect what they're trying to do." Later, in a secured engineering chamber deeper in the ship, Ethan was summoned again. This time, the order came directly from Surith. She stood upright now, fully armored, her presence commanding even without weapons drawn. The repairs he had made allowed her to move freely, and the difference was impossible to ignore. "You will show me," she said, "what you saw. But when hit by high-frequency weapons, it traps excess energy instead of releasing it. It'll adapt to them." Ethan was given access to tools he had never touched before: alien metals, adaptive circuits, materials that responded to thought and motion. Instead of being overwhelmed, he was fascinated. He worked slowly, testing everything twice, sometimes 3 times. Surith stayed nearby the entire time. She watched his hands. They were steady but not rigid. When something resisted, he adjusted instead of forcing it. When a system reacted badly, he apologized to it under his breath, then corrected course. At one point, a sudden power spike surged through the frame. The chamber lights flickered. Ethan reacted instantly, bracing the structure and rerouting energy through himself using a manual override. The surge passed. Ethan staggered back, breathing hard. Surith caught him before he fell. "You absorbed damage meant for machines," she said, disbelief in her voice. Ethan gave a weak smile. "Old habit." Surith tested it in the training hall soon after. Warriors gathered to watch as she moved through drills. Faster turns, heavier impacts, controlled landings. The armor flowed with her instead of resisting. The whispers began again, louder this time. "That is human work." "This human did not weaken our traditions," she declared. "He strengthened them by preserving what matters most, our lives." Surith turned toward Ethan. "You stabilized my armor," she said. "Now tell me, can it survive what comes next?" He was part of the fight, and across the ship, warriors who once ignored him now watched the human with cautious respect, wondering what else his careful hands might change. The stars outside burned brighter as the warship surged forward to meet its enemies. The warship shook as it dropped out of hyperspace. Red warning lights flashed across the bridge, and the calm hum of travel was replaced by the sharp cry of battle alarms. Enemy vessels filled the main display, sleek, angular ships arranged in an attack pattern that spoke of planning and confidence. They had been waiting. Commander Surith stood at the center of the bridge, fully armored. The changes Ethan had made were invisible to the eye, but she could feel them in every movement. The armor rested on her like a second skin instead of a heavy shell. Power flowed smoothly through it, steady and alive. She turned her head slightly. "Human," she said. Ethan stood near an auxiliary console, hands already moving across controls. "I see them," he replied. Same weapon signatures as before, high-frequency pulses. The bridge filled with overlapping voices. status reports flying in faster than they could be processed. Shields down 5%. On the tactical display, enemy fighters slipped through the outer defenses, darting toward the ship like sharp teeth. "Commander," an officer called out, "their weapons are targeting armor signatures. They are hunting you." "You're going out there?" he asked, moving to follow. She stopped and looked back at him. "You said the armor could adapt," she said. "Now I will prove it." Ethan stood at the control panel, fingers hovering over emergency overrides. He hated this part. Machines were predictable, combat was not. "Be careful," he muttered, not sure who he was saying it to. The platform launched. Surith burst into open space, thrusters flaring. Enemy fighters immediately adjusted course, locking onto her glowing armor. They fired without hesitation. The first hit struck her chest. The armor absorbed it. Energy rippled across the reinforced channels Ethan had modified, spreading the impact instead of trapping it. Surith felt the force, but it did not crush her. It did not burn. She smiled grimly and surged forward. She moved faster than ever before, weaving between incoming fire, her armor responding instantly to her intent. Where once she would have had to fight against its limits, now it followed her thoughts. On the bridge, stunned silence fell as her armor telemetry streamed in. "Commander's systems are improving," an engineer whispered. "The armor is learning." In real time, a massive beam tore through space, aimed directly at Surith. On the bridge, several warriors shouted warnings at once. Ethan's breath caught. "That's too much," he said. "She won't." But the new channels opened. Power flowed outward instead of inward. Heat bled away. Stress redistributed. The armor bent without breaking. Surith screamed, not in pain but in effort, and forced herself forward through the beam. She emerged from the blast cloud, armor glowing white-hot but intact. The bridge erupted in stunned disbelief. "She survived," someone whispered. Ethan sagged against the console, hands shaking. "You're welcome," he murmured under his breath. The enemy fleet panicked. Fighters broke formation. Defensive patterns collapsed. They had just witnessed something that should not exist, a warrior walking through their strongest weapon. Surith did not waste the moment. She charged the capital ship. Using the armor's enhanced control, she latched onto its hull, tearing into exposed systems with precision. Each strike was deliberate, controlled. She was not raging, she was executing. Inside the enemy ship, systems failed one by one. On the bridge, officers stared at the tactical display as the enemy flagship went dark. "Enemy command vessel disabled," an officer announced, stunned. "Their fleet is retreating. You don't need to prove anything." Then she looked at Ethan. He was already there, checking readings, concern written plainly across his face. He didn't bow. He didn't cheer. He just asked the only question that mattered. "Are you alive?" The engineers spoke in low, serious tones. Data scrolled endlessly across displays, confirming what everyone already knew. The armor was changed forever. Surith stood before them. "Today," she said, "we faced an enemy who believed they understood us. They believed our strength was fixed, predictable. They were wrong," she continued, "because they did not account for humanity." "Someone had to make sure the armor didn't fall apart," he said simply. A few warriors actually laughed. Surith raised her hand, silencing them. "From this moment," she declared, "humans are no longer auxiliary. They are allies." But something far greater had begun. And deep within the ship systems, the armor rested quietly around its commander, changed by careful hands and a human who believed that survival was worth breaking tradition for. The warship drifted in quiet space, its damaged sections sealed and its engines humming at low power. The battle was over, but its echoes still lived in every corridor and every mind aboard. Commander Surith stood alone in the medical chamber, her armor slowly unlocking piece by piece. Soft mechanical sounds filled the room as the plates separated and folded away. Beneath it, she showed signs of exhaustion she had refused to display in front of her warriors. She should have collapsed. Instead, she remained standing. Across the room, Ethan waited in silence, arms folded loosely, eyes fixed on a diagnostic screen. He had been ordered to rest. He had ignored that order, as he often did when machines or lives were involved. The final plate disengaged, and Surith exhaled deeply. "The armor held," she said. Ethan nodded. "It did more than hold. It adapted." At the center stood Surith, restored but still bearing the weight of command. Ethan stood behind her, noticeably human among towering figures of armored flesh and bone. The elder at the highest tier spoke first. "Commander Surith," he said, "you acted outside tradition. You allowed a human to alter sacred armor." "I allowed a human to save my life," she replied evenly, "and the lives of this crew. He respected our lives more than our pride." "You risked your own life," one said. Ethan nodded. "That happens sometimes." "From this cycle forward," the elder declared, "human engineers will be granted equal standing in armor development and battlefield systems. Not as servants, not as tools, but as partners." Warriors who once walked past Ethan without a glance now nodded in acknowledgement. Some even stopped to ask questions, not challenges but genuine curiosity. Ethan answered them all. In the days that followed, he worked side by side with Carvex engineers, showing them how to listen to stress patterns, how to read small failures before they became disasters. He never mocked their traditions. He never dismissed their knowledge. He built on it. The armor changed, not in appearance but in behavior. It responded faster, protected better, failed less often. The Carvex warriors noticed. So did their enemies. News of the battle spread across nearby systems. Reports spoke of a commander who walked through a capital weapon and survived, of armor that adapted instead of breaking, of humans who did not fight with claws or fangs, but with careful minds. Other species began to ask questions. Why did humans succeed where others failed? The answer was simple. They cared. One cycle later, the warship docked at a neutral station for resupply. Representatives from allied species gathered, eager to see the legendary commander and the human who changed everything. Surith stood in full ceremonial armor, updated, reinforced, alive. Ethan stood beside her, wearing a plain human uniform with burned marks he never bothered to replace. An alien diplomat leaned close to another and whispered, "Is that truly the human?" She turned slightly and spoke loud enough for them to hear. "He is. You fix more than machines. Because this still isn't perfect," he said, "and because there are more lives depending on it." "When I asked you to be careful," she said, "I believed I was protecting you." They were not the fastest. They were not the most numerous. But when something broke, when systems failed, when pride stood in the way of survival,